Hello interwebs, I'm Eric and welcome to The Looney Turtle. So this week I was originally going to make a video about llamas with hats because they recently came out with an epilogue episode that could be worth covering, especially since I made this video a while back about the final few episodes of the series as a whole, and I've gotten a couple of comments. People want me to talk about it, and I do want to talk about it. But this week I don't quite have a script ready for it. I might have one next week or the week after that, and that video is still coming, but I found that I just wasn't quite ready to publish or edit a video about the series this close to the release of the prologue. That said, last week's video kind of blew up, a lot more than I expected it to. And so I decided that this week might be a good opportunity to a comment response, especially since there was almost 200 comments left on that video. Thank you all for commenting, liking, subscribing. It's very good for the channel. I'm glad to see this kind of engagement again. And at this point, especially with that video, I have been reading every single comment on that video. So while you may or may not be seen in this video, do know that I have read everybody's comments. I've seen them all. It's just some I decided to kind of highlight in this video. Others, there's so many. I kind of have to pick and choose about which ones we'll talk about, but hopefully the ones that I did are good for conversation. So first off, these two comments, very encouraging. The first one made me feel good, and they just basically expressed a lot of appreciation for the video. Second one, they liked the video and encouraged me to continue. These kinds of comments really do make making these videos all the more worthwhile, because it at least lets me know that there is appreciation for it. So even if you have nothing else to say, you can kind of give words of encouragement or tell me what you liked about the video. Any comment I will probably read, so there's that. This comment gets the award for the longest comment. There's a lot in here, but I can't really think of how to start a conversation about all that's expressed, because even by their own admission, there's a little bit of rambling in there. But it's definitely an interesting read, so I thought I'd bring that one up for anybody who wants something to kind of read through and might get some ideas from it. But yeah, definitely a long comment there. There's also Jack Kemp 7256. They brought up a good point that I hadn't considered. G4 had a kind of a decline after season 4, and they have come to appreciate how there's no story beyond fixing. I didn't really consider that in my analysis. In this video, I was kind of focused more on the reaction to G5 and why that might be because of the G4 inclusion, but I hadn't really considered that there are a lot of bronies out there, surprisingly, that believe that G4 kind of declined after season 4 because the writing was kind of handled by different groups and ultimately may have reached a conclusion that isn't for all audiences. I personally enjoyed the direction that they went in exploring the world, the different characters, introducing the Student 6 and so on, but I can understand those who think that it was a bit of a decline throughout the rest of the series. There's also this comment by Harmonizing Entertainment, where they mention that they're making their own kind of Ponyville akin to the Orville. I'll try to keep an eye on the production of that, but I don't really have much to say about the series at the moment. But it is something that was mentioned that I should probably, mention at the very least. For anybody who's interested in a fan-made version of My Little Pony that is copyright safe, you can always check that out. This one by Stillwater Rude Deep 001. They bring up that Hasbro is not really dependent on the bronies in order to survive, and I feel like that kind of misses the point. This video is more about the emotional reaction to season 5 because of its inclusion of G5, because of its inclusion of G4. And it feels like pointing out or really bringing the fact that My Little Pony isn't for adults kind of misses the point of analyzing and discussing that emotional reaction. Because from a logistics perspective, yeah, My Little Pony's just for children, so adults shouldn't really feel anything, but they do. Why? That's the question of the video. So I thought that might be at least a little bit worth mentioning there. These next two are actually detail-oriented about just kind of the creative decisions of the video that I'm glad some people picked up on. Joined the Herd specifically kind of found it cheeky that I had the intro start out with the very first lyrics of the song, and that was very much an intentional choice. Like, the only reason that the introduction of My Little Pony and the different clips are shown at the beginning is because I wanted to delay just long enough to start out with the line, "When I started out, I was unsure." Kind of a cheeky little detail I put in there, and I'm glad that it was at least noticed by somebody, especially the musician who created the Magic of Friendship remix that I used for the video. Also, Ronin44444 noticed that the transition from the MLP footage to my channel theming was kind of carefully put together, and honestly, that's one of those details that I spent a long time putting together in the edit, but in the finalizing the video, I didn't really think much about it. But yeah, it is one of those things that, looking back, I am kind of proud of. So definitely going to keep that in mind if I do want to do transitions like this in the future. And then the big one that I probably should have mentioned better in the video: am I leaving the fandom? There's a lot of people on Discord and on YouTube that have their names are here, that have mentioned that they think that this video is saying that I'm leaving the fandom. To clarify, no, I am not leaving the fandom. I'm head of theatrics for BabsCon this year, so it would kind of be a bad time to leave the fandom because I've still got stuff to do. No, the point of the video being titled Abandoning a Fandom is that I feel that Hasbro has abandoned the fans that enjoyed G4 by shoehorning them in a careless way. I actually, in an earlier draft, I made it a point to specifically say that Hasbro has abandoned the fandom, but I guess that line didn't make it into the final cut. At the very least, the thumbnail does feature Hasbro's logo walking away from the Friendship is Magic logo, so at least it's kind of implied there, but I can understand that it's not very clear. The title is eye-catching but not clarified, so sorry about that. There are also other comments that commented on interpreting the world of G5 in different ways to kind of make it make sense. HelloMan181 said that they would make G5 a prequel because it does make sense. They are essentially in Hearthwarming Times, so why not just have a story in Hearthwarming Times? That would be perfectly fine. Random Productions 1837 also said that it could have been a prequel. Yipper64 says that they're going to be sticking to their theory of an alternate timeline or other dimension, which also works as a way of interpreting and making sense of the G4 world, it being included in G5. This commenter also points out some story inconsistencies and questions the logic of the G5 world, including Moondancer as a grandmother, as well as Twilight locking all of the magic away and the villains could get to them. Like, there's a couple of details that are worth exploring as to being an inconsistency with the G4 world and the G5 world, because it's implied through the show that it's over thousands of years, but also if Moondancer was the grandmother, then that's hundreds of years. So the timeline doesn't quite make sense. There's other details like that. So definitely kind of good to point those things out. Owlcat Hooves also has a theory that G5 is just a fan fiction that Dash made, or I think they were wishful about it. Loak points out an idea that maybe Discord just screwed everything up because Twilight died, and that's why the world is the way it is, which could make sense with the inclusion of the G5 comics, with Discord being there, being kind of distraught and all of that. It could make sense that he just kind of screwed everything up. I mean, his power is strong enough, but it would be a little bit out of character given the development that he had in G4. Personally, I see the G4 world working as a separate settlement, kind of like I did in my original video about G5. I think that the best way that you incorporate the G4 characters without tarnishing their legacy is to have this take place in a different part of the Equestria world, because there is kind of some ribbons open that we could potentially explore with that, including the hearth-swarming tribes. Like, we know that the leaders left to found Equestria proper, but what happened to those original settlements? Where did they take place? What happened to the ponies in those settlements? And I think that G5 presents a potential of they just kept growing as a civilization without having to deal with the Wendigos. They just kind of developed and then maybe heard about G4 Equestria just through the grapevine, but overall they're kind of their own thing, and they're slowly learning about the magic of friendship and exploring ancient artifacts that were in prehistoric Equestria, while Twilight and her friends could still exist and maybe even make cameos, but overall it would give an opening for this civilization, this alternate point in the G4 world to explore their things, while Equestria proper for G4 is kind of left to exist in its own area. And that's kind of the best case scenario I would see in incorporating the G4 characters while also not tearing everything down in order to accomplish that. There are a lot of comments that actually point out similar situations in which a studio interfered with a project and caused problems, including this one about Sonic Underground, this one about Pokemon, and this one commenting that they are used to retcons because of Kingdom Hearts having a lot of retcons. So there's definitely things that you can relate to the creation of G5 that are similar to other situations in media, which I could have explored more thoroughly in this video, but unfortunately I didn't. Maybe, a future video idea. So, yeah. And then there is a lot of comments that talk about production issues. There is this comment by DaveMan1K, who points to a video by CXCD. I have been meaning to watch the video, but I haven't yet. Apparently, from what this commenter is saying, it is a good rundown of how everything fell apart for G5, and it probably explores some of the points that are brought up in the other comments by, like this one from Emerald Bookwise, that kind of talks about how it was passed from one internal studio to an external studio, and then one project was supposed to be handled by an internal studio, but also ended up having to be handled by an external studio. So there's a lot of kind of back and forth production issues that made it difficult for this series to work as well as it could have. And I hope that in the next generation they actually try to mitigate those issues by working with very specific studios and keeping the vision together as to what they plan to do with the series. Robert, who disagrees and thinks that the issue was in relation to Discovery Family. Jenny Blaze is reminded of Code Lyoko Evolution and considers it a sequel without heart because they brought back the main villain even though it didn't make sense and they killed the studio. JCJ268 points to Chris Cook, the CEO of Hasbro, as the solo studio executive that caused this series to kind of flop. And then Aaron Markerson 7717 responds to that particular comment and points to the rights issues over the characters and the stories for G4, which also might be explored in that video by CXCD. So yeah, basically you could give that video a watch, and it is definitely worth considering some of the under the hood kind of issues that came about and caused the issues with the storytelling for G5. So yeah. Then there are a couple of other comments that try to say that they didn't erase Twilight's accomplishments because it happened, but time changes things. And to this particular argument, yes, that makes sense. And it is more realistic, but this is entertainment at the end of the day, and there are some stories that are best told without a continuation, without a this is the future, whereas others it makes sense to have that continuation. Like with Star Wars, they had a whole prequel series to kind of give context to the rise of the Empire, but with My Little Pony, it's kind of best to just leave the stories where they're at rather than tearing them apart to continue to another series. Grimwolf001 brings up examples like athletes and the progression of the world that can lead to a regression. In real life, there have been situations in which we progressed to a certain point and then completely collapsed, like the fall of the Roman Empire as an example that comes to mind. I don't think they brought that one specifically. They more focus on the world wars and the Great Depression and so on. The problem with the athletes example specifically is that when you have an athlete that makes an accomplishment and then an athlete that surpasses that accomplishment, you can appreciate both because they were trailblazers in their time. But the problem in comparing that to Twilight and Sunny Star Scout's adventures is that Sunny isn't surpassing Twilight in a significant way. In fact, it feels like we were thrown back before Twilight's journey, and Sunny's kind of retreading old ground. And so it kind of feels weird to be comparing athletes to a legacy. The secondary example that comes to mind with them is pointing to real life and how there have been times in which we've regressed as a society and still been able to appreciate things that are going on despite there being a bit of a drawback to the world. With G4 Equestria, the way in which they tear apart the previous show's accomplishments feels out of character for the characters. Twilight started a school for all creatures to come to learn about friendship, and she was very much involved in spreading friendship across the land. So it's weird that a person who would be so invested in doing that would then decide, let's alienate everybody into their own groups to protect them. Like, that feels out of character for Twilight, and it also feels out of character for Spike to forget all of that journey. So the regression in society logistically makes sense, but from a character from analyzing the characters, it doesn't feel right for the characters to have done this. Like, the stepping stones that they use to get to this point don't feel genuine to the world. It feels like a way to do it, but not the right way to do it. My issue is that it feels like an unnatural regression of the world as opposed to a natural progression. Like, if you look at Avatar: The Last Airbender, when we start with Legend of Korra, we don't start with Korra being in a world that is at war with the Fire Kingdom because the Fire Kingdom wanted to spread its influence over the world. No, that was Aang's adventure. Instead, Korra has to kind of grapple with the legacy that Aang left in the wake of his lifetime, because he did a lot. He accomplished a lot. There is a story of how Aang's life progressed, and we even see some of the old figures from that original journey. We see Zuko, we see Katara, we see Sokka. Like, we see the old gang. The only thing that's changed is Aang has aged and he has passed away. It feels like a more natural progression of the world because they're taking what was and expanding it, as opposed to what G5 did to G4 was it obliterated everything and brought us back to Hearthswarming Tribes to continue the story. Like, it feels like there is a large erasure of the accomplishments that came before, and that's the ultimate problem that I see with the G5 world, is that it doesn't seem interested in being the G4 world despite being the G4 world, whereas with Legend of Korra, for whether or not people like or hate the show, it's clear that they approached it from the perspective of how does this world continue after Aang and his adventures. And I think that's the kind of progression that they should have gone with for G5. Unfortunate that they didn't, but it does make sense that because of that erasure, there is a lot of mixed feelings about how things progressed. So, yeah, That has been kind of my overall thoughts for a comment response. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see all of you in the next video.